Hey guys, welcome to an SAT Section 1 review. So we're going to be doing the no calculator section where we get 25 minutes for 20 questions. Now on the SAT you get a calculator for both sections, but this is an older version so there's going to be no calculator, but the questions are around the same. So let's try this without a calculator. Question 1. The cost C in dollars that a catering company charges to cater a wedding is given by the function C is equal to 20 WT plus 300, where W represents the amount of workers catering the wedding and T represents the total time in hours it will take to cater the wedding using W workers. Which of the following is the best explanation for the number 20 in the function? Let's locate 20. With 20, we have the variables W and T. W represents the number of workers, and then T represents the total time in hours, so total time. So associated with 20 is workers and time, so we're looking for the answer choice with workers and times in it. A minimum of 20 workers will cater the wedding. It talks about workers but not time, so A is not the answer. B, the cost of every wedding will increase by 20 per hour. It doesn't talk about the number of workers, so that's not the answer. C, the catering company charges $20 per hour for each worker. Ooh, we got hours and workers, so that could be the answer. And now let's go to D. There will be 20 guests at the wedding, so it doesn't talk about the workers or time. So C is the answer. Now let's go to number 2. If 12x plus 4 is equal to 20, what is the value of 6x plus 5? So we just have to solve for x. We have 12x plus 4 is equal to 20. Let's get 4 to the other side. We could do that by subtracting 4 on both sides, giving us 12x is equal to 16. And the question is asking for 6x plus 5. 6x is just half of 12x, so we could divide both sides by 2, giving us 6x is equal to 8. That's the value of 6x. So we just plug in 8 into 6x. That's going to be 8 plus 5, which is 13. And D is the answer. Number 3, which of the following pairs below is a solution to the system of equations above? Normally you would have a calculator and you would just plug in the system of equations into Desmos and then you find the points of intersection, but we don't have a calculator, so let's just solve this. I'm going to use the substitution method. So I'm going to take this second equation over here and solve for one variable. So I'm going to add I could choose either, but I'll choose y. I could add y on both sides. So that's going to give me y is equal to negative x. So I could plug in the value of negative x for y in this equation. So 5x minus 4, so instead of y, I'm going to replace that with negative x is equal to 36. And then now let's solve. 5x negative 4 times negative x is positive 4x is equal to 36. 5x plus 4x is 9x is equal to 36. We divide 9 on both sides, giving us x is equal to 4. And the only answer choice with a x coordinate of positive 4 is C. So that is the answer. Number 4, in the equation y minus the square root of 4x squared plus 28 is equal to 0, x is greater than 0, and y is equal to 8. What is the value of x? Okay, so let's plug in everything that we know. We know that y is equal to 8. So if we plug that in, our new equation would be 8 minus root 4x squared plus 28 is equal to 0. Now let's get rid of the 8. We could do that by doing the opposite operation. So we subtract 8 on both sides, giving us negative root 4x squared plus 28 is equal to negative 8. And to get rid of the negative sign in front, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1, giving me the square root of 4x squared plus 28 is equal to positive 8. And to get rid of the square root, I'm going to take the square of it. So whatever I do to one side, I'm going to have to do to the other side. That's going to give me 4x squared plus 28 is equal to 8 squared, which is 64. And now we just solve for x from here. So we subtract 28 on both sides. That's going to give us 4x squared is equal to 36. Divide 4 on both sides. X squared is going to have to be equal to 36 divided by 4, which is positive 9. And to get rid of the squared, finally, I'm going to have to do the square root of it. That's going to give me x is equal to plus or minus, don't forget the plus or minus 3, but it says that x is greater than 0, so it's going to have to be positive 3. A is the answer. Let's go to page 2. The figure above shows quadrilateral ABCD in the xy plane. If BC is parallel to AD, what is the value of R? In order for two lines to be parallel, their slopes must be the same. So we know that AD is parallel to BC, so their slopes must be the exact same. How do we find the slope? Well, we do change of y divided by change of x. Basically, you subtract the y coordinates and you divide it by the subtraction of the x coordinates. So let's first find the slope of BC because we actually know the number values. I'm going to call these coordinates x1, y1 and these coordinates x2, y2. It doesn't matter which ones you label as x1, y1 or x2, y2, it's going to give you the same answer. So if you plug it into the formula, that's going to give us 0 minus 10 over 6 minus 0. That's negative 10 over 6, which simplifies to negative 5/3. So the slope of this line must also be negative 5/3. I'm going to label these coordinates as x1, y1, and these coordinates as x2, y2. Plug it into the formula. That's going to be 0 minus r over negative 3 minus 0, which is going to give us negative r over negative 3, which simplifies to r over 3. That's going to be slope of this line. And we know that the slope must be negative 5/3, so we set that equal to negative 5/3. And from this, it's kind of obvious that r is equal to negative 5. So that's going to be our answer. Number 6, which of the following expressions is equivalent to 16x squared minus 24x cubed y cubed plus 9y to the 6th power? Don't actually try expanding these because it would actually take you forever. So we do process of elimination. Looking at answer choice 8, we have 16. I'm going to look at the first number, 16 cubed. That's going to be like a really big number. One that is not listed in an expression, so that cannot be the answer. 16, I'm going to again look at the constant. 16 squared, or the coefficient. 16 squared is also going to be a really big number, one that is not listed in this expression. So B is not the answer, but looking at answer choice C, we have 4. 4 squared is 16. Oh, so that does work. So I'm going to leave that alone and look at answer choice D. 4 to the 6th power. That's also going to be a really big number. So C is going to be the answer. Number 7, the measure s in degrees of the sum of the angles in a polygon is related to the number of sides n of the polygon by the formula above for all n is greater than 2. If the sum of the angles of a polygon is greater than 2,000 degrees, then what is the least number of sides it can have? So it says that the sum of the angles is greater than 2,000 degrees. Words like greater than, less than, greater than equal to, or less than equal to are indicators of an inequality. So we have 2,000 and then it's going to be greater than, so it's going to be this symbol turning away from 2,000. So the sum, which is represented by the formula 180 times n minus 2, must be greater than 2,000. And from here we just solve for n, so we could distribute 180 times n is just 180n, and 180 times negative 2 is negative 360. So 2,000 is less than 180n minus 360. So now we can solve for n. We could add 360 on both sides, giving us 2,360 is less than 180n. We divide 180 on both sides. That's going to give us n is greater than, so that's going to give us actually 13.11111, a decimal number. And then it's asking for the least number of sides it can have. So n must be greater than 13.11111, and it must also be a whole number, so the answer is going to have to be 14D. Now let's go to number 8. The graph of line K in the xy plane has a y-intercept of negative 8 and contains the point 4, 4. The graph of line M contains the point 1, 5 and 5, negative 3. If the lines K and M intersect at the points S, T, what is the value of S minus T? This question is just going to be long. Not hard, just long. So we have to find the intersections, which means that we have a system of equations. We have to create 2 equations out of line K and line M. How do we do that? Well, they're going to be in the form y is equal to mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So let's look at line K. It says that it has a y-intercept of negative 8, so we already know that. And it contains the point 4, 4, so we do not know the slope. How do we get the slope? Well, we just plug in what we know. Well, we know that the y-intercept is negative 8. And then we are given coordinates, so we could plug in the coordinates to find the slope. The y value is going to be 4, m, unknown number. And then we know that the x-coordinate is 4, so we just solve for m from here. We can add 8 on both sides, giving us 12 is equal to 4m. Divide 4 on both sides. M is going to have to be equal to 3. So the equation of line K is just y is equal to 3x minus 8. That's line K. And let's look at line M now. It says that it contains the point 1, 5 and 5, negative 3. It doesn't explicitly say it, but whenever you are given 2 coordinates, you can automatically solve for the slope. To solve for the slope, we do change of y divided by change of x. Basically, you subtract the y coordinates, as I said earlier, and then you divide it by the subtraction of the x coordinates. So I'm gonna label these coordinates as x1, y1, and these coordinates as x2, y2. Again, it doesn't really matter. That's gonna give us -3 minus 5 over 5 minus 1. -3 minus 5 is -8, and then 5 minus 1 is +4. That's gonna simplify to -2. So the slope of line M is -2. And we are given two coordinates that we could plug in. I'm gonna choose this one. So we know that the y coordinate is 5 is equal to the slope, which is -2, times the x coordinate, which is 1, plus b. We do not know the y-intercept yet. That's what we are solving for. 5 is equal to -2 times 1, which is -2 plus b. We can add 2 on both sides, giving us b is equal to 7. So the equation of the second of line M is going to be y is equal to -2x plus 7. Now we have two system of equations. We have line M, y is equal to -2x plus 7, and y is equal to 3x minus 8. I need a whole new piece of paper for this. So we have system of equations, and our goal is to find the intersection, which is s comma t, and then ultimately find s minus t. So let's do that. Well, they're both set equal to y, so I could just set 3x minus 8 equal to -2x plus 7. So let's solve for x from here. I could add 2x on both sides. I'm going to get x on one side and the numbers on the other side. So 5x minus 8 is equal to +7. And then now I add 8 on both sides, giving me 5x is equal to 15. To get x alone, I divide both sides by 5, giving me x is equal to 3. That's going to be the s value. Now we have to find the t value, the y coordinate of that. So we could choose either of these equations. I'm going to just choose the first one over here and plug 3 into the equation. So y is equal to 3 times 3 minus 8. 9 minus 8 is +1, so the y coordinate of the intersection would be 1. So the t value is 1. So s minus 2 would just be 3 minus 1, which is +2. And that is the answer. So 8. Okay, let's move on to the next page. In the equation above, k is greater than 1 and x is equal to 3. What is the positive value of y? First, let's multiply this out. This deals with exponent rules. Whenever you multiply powers with the same basis, you keep the base and add up the exponents. So it's going to be k to the x squared plus xy plus y squared plus xy power. Set that equal to k to the 25th power. And then let's add up like terms. It's going to be k to the x squared plus 2xy plus y squared is equal to k to the 25th power. Since on both sides the bases are the same, we could set the exponents equal to each other. X squared plus 2xy plus y squared is equal to 25. And it says that x is equal to 3, so we just plug it in. 3 squared plus 2 times 3y plus y squared is equal to 25. 3 squared is 9 plus 6y plus y squared is equal to 25. I need more room. Okay, so I need to get everything on one side of the equation and factor it to solve for y. So I subtract 25 on both sides, giving me -16. Actually, I'm going to rewrite it. So I'm going to put y squared in front plus 6y and then move the constants in the back. So it's going to be -16 is equal to 0. And now I can factor this out. How I factor is I list out all of the factors of the constant, which in this case is -16. So that's going to be -116, -16, 1, -2, 8, -8, 2, and finally -4 and 4. And then I add them up to see which one gives me the coefficient of the second highest degree term, which is 6. -1 plus 16 is 15. -16 plus 1 is -15. -2 plus 8 is 6. So this is going to be my pair of numbers. So I'm going to write it as y minus 2 times y plus 8. That's going to be how you factor. So the y values I give me is 0. In this case, is going to be 2 and -8. And it says that k is greater than 1. So, and it says that y is positive, so the answer is going to be 2. Ooh, B. Okay, number 10, we are halfway there. A factory tracks quality control by using the formula above to determine a fault rating F based on the number of detected parts D and the number of acceptable parts E. Which of the following expresses D in terms of F and E? It gives you a whole lot of useless information. You only really need the last line, d in terms of f and e, so we have to isolate d here. Whenever you isolate a variable, you always want to get rid of the denominator, so we have to get rid of the e minus d. We could do that by multiplying both sides by e minus d. That's going to give us, so we distribute, fe minus fd is equal to d, and then to solve for d, we need all of the d variables on one side of the equation, so you have to add fd on both sides. That's going to give us fe is equal to d plus fd, and then now we're going to factor out d because that's a common factor, so that's going to give us d times d divided by d is 1, and fd divided by d is f, so that's factoring out d. And then we can now divide both sides by 1 plus f. That's going to give us d is equal to fe over 1 plus f. And that is the answer. C. Okay, number 11. The graph in the xy plane of the function g has a property that y is always greater than or equal to -2. Which of the following could be g? In a function, g of x is the same thing as y, so if it has to be always greater than or equal to -2, I already know the answer, because the thing is, whenever you square a number, it's always going to be positive. So B is the obvious answer. But if you really want to make sure that's your answer, you could plug in 0. 0 squared is 0, and 0 minus 3 is -3. That is already less than -2, so that's not the answer. 0, the absolute value of 0 is just 0, so 0 minus 3 is again -3. That's not the answer. 0, that's going to be -3 cubed, which is -27, and that's not the answer. So B is the answer. Now let's look at 12. Which of the following complex numbers is equivalent to 1 plus 10i over 6 minus 3i? So we are dealing with imaginary numbers. This is always the case. I is always equal to the square root of -1. So whenever you have an imaginary number in the denominator, basically what you do is multiply by the conjugate of the denominator. The conjugate is just the same thing, just the opposite operation. So instead of subtraction, it's going to be addition plus 3i, and then I'm also going to multiply by the same thing to the numerator. And the reason why you could do this is because 6 plus 3i divided by 6 plus 3i is just 1. So, and whenever you multiply anything by 1, it's the same thing, so you could actually do that. Now let's multiply. So we're going to have to use the FOIL method to multiply this out. FOIL stands for this. F stands for multiplying the first terms. So let's do the numerator first. 1 times 6 is 6. O stands for multiplying the two outer terms. 1 times 3i is positive 3i. I stands for multiplying the two inner terms. 10i times 6 is 60i. And then finally, L stands for multiplying the two last terms. 10i times 3i is positive 30i squared. Now it says that I is equal to the square root of -1. So if you square that, it's going to be -1. So instead of I squared, we're going to replace that with -1. And 30 times -1 is -30. So if we plug it in, it's going to just be -24. And then we add up like terms plus 63i. That's going to be our numerator. And then let's solve for the denominator. We do the same method. We multiply the two first terms, 36, the two outer terms, positive 18i, the two inner terms, negative 18i, and then the two last terms, negative 9i squared. The 18i minus 18i cancels out, giving us, and wait, actually, let's do this first. I squared is -1, so we again do -1 times -9, which is positive 9. So if we add up like terms, it's going to give us 45, and that cancels out to 0. That's going to be our denominator. So if we piece it all together, our numerator is -24 plus 63i, and our denominator is 45. It's kind of messy, but let's follow along. And then so we could split this into -24 over 45 plus 63i over 45. The left side over here, that simplifies to -8 over 15. And on the right side, that simplifies to 7i over 5. So that's going to be our answer. D. All right, next page. Number 13. The estimated value of a truck declines at an annual rate of 7%. The original value of the truck was $35,000, which of the function v best models the value of the truck in dollars t years later. This question is exponential decay because it says that it declines at an annual rate of 7%. So it's not linear. It doesn't decrease at the same amount every single year. So we're going to have to know about the exponential decay formula, which is the initial, P initial, times 1 minus the rate raised to the number of years. That's exponential decay. So we start off with the initial value of $35,000. 35K is our P initial value. 1 minus the rate is 7%. So we're going to have to convert that to a decimal. Or you could do 7 over 100, but I'm going to do decimal because the answer choices are in decimal form. 7% written as a decimal is you take 7 and move the decimal point 2 place values to the left. So it's going to be 0.07 raised to t, the number of years. So the formula is going to be, the equation is 35,000 times 1 minus 0.07, which is 0.93, raised to the number of years. D is the answer. Let's look at 14. Which of the following is equivalent to the expression above? So we're going to be dividing polynomials. 6x minus 1 is our dividend. And then our divisor is x plus 4. Okay, here's how you divide. How many times does x go into 6x? 6 times. So it's going to be 6. And then 6 times x is 6x. 6 times 4 is 24. And then we subtract the 2. 6x minus 6x is 0x. Negative 1 minus 24 is negative 25. So that's going to be the remainder, because how many times does x go into negative 25? 0 times. You can't go any further. So you're going to write this as 6 plus our remainder, negative 25, over the divisor, which is x plus 4. This is basically just long division, just with the x's and stuff like that. So it's going to be 6 minus 25 over x plus 4. That's the answer A. Last multiple choice. What is the product of all values of k that satisfy the equation above? The long way is actually factoring this out and solving for the values of k and then multiplying the solutions and the values of k. But I have a little shortcut when finding the product of all of the solutions of a polynomial. And that is with the formula c over a, where c is the constant, and then a is the coefficient of the highest degree term, which in this case is 3. So we plug into the formula, that's going to be 12 over 3, which is 4. And B is the answer. Now let's transition over to the free response questions. In the equation, 3 times x minus 5 squared plus 7 is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. A, b, and c are constants. If the equation is true for all values of x, what is the value of c? Okay, so we're going to have to expand this into standard form. So according to PEMDAS, exponent comes first. So we do x minus 5 squared first. Again, we use the FOIL method to multiply this out. F stands for multiplying the 2 first terms, the 2 outer terms, and then the 2 inner terms, and then finally the 2 last terms. And then we add up like terms, x squared minus 10x plus 25. And then multiplication comes next, so we multiply this whole thing by 3, giving us 3x squared minus 30x plus 75. And finally, addition comes last, so we add 7 to that. And then this, adding like terms again, that's going to give us 3x squared minus 30x plus 82. So that's going to be standard form. And according to this, the c value must be the constant, which is 82. That's the answer. Now number 17, in the figure above, BD is parallel to AE. What is the length of AE? Okay, so we know that triangle CBD is inside of triangle CAE, so we know that they are similar triangles, meaning that their corresponding sides must be proportional. So looking at triangle CBD, the long side is 12, and then the shorter side is 10. So it must be proportional to the corresponding sides of triangle CAE. The long side of triangle CAE would be this length over here, 12 plus 6 is 18. And then the shorter side of that angle, the corresponding side, would be this one, AE, and I'm going to call that x because that's unknown. And then we could just solve for x from here. So we could cross multiply. 12 times x is 12x. Set that equal to 18 times 10, 180. Divide 12 on both sides. X is going to be equal to 15. And that is the answer. Number 18, at the end of a card game, Evie pulls a pile of red and blue chips that is worth $120. If red chips are worth $5 and blue chips are worth $20, and Evie has at least one red chip and at least one blue chip, what is one possible value of red chips Evie has? So this is one of the easiest type of questions because there are multiple answers. So you don't have to worry about like, oh, there's only one answer. Okay, so let's first form an equation. red chips are worth $5 each. So we have 5, and I'm going to let R represent the number of red chips. So 5R is the total amount that Evie spends on red chips plus $20 blue chips. So it's $20 each, and I'm going to call blue the number of blue chips. And in total, she spends $120. Okay, now it says that Evie has at least one red chip and at least one blue chip, and the question is asking for one possible value of red chips. So we have to solve for R, and it says that Evie has at least one blue chip, so I'm going to just call B1. You could do that. You could put any number. So 5R plus 20 times 1 is equal to 120. Well, actually, you can't put any number, but play it safe with 1. Okay, and then now let's solve. 5R plus 20 is equal to 120, and then we subtract 20 on both sides. That's going to give us 5R is equal to 100. Divide 5 on both sides. R is 20. And that could be one of your answer. Okay, number 19. In the system of equations above, A and B are constants. If there are infinitely many solutions for this system, what is the value of A plus B? So what does it mean for two equations to have infinitely many solutions? That just means that they are always touching, because the number of solutions indicate the number of intersections. If there are infinitely many solutions, then it's always touching, which means that it's like the same line. So these two equations have to represent the same line, same slope, same y-intercept, and everything. So looking at these numbers, that's clearly the y-intercepts because it's a constant, and we need them to be the same number. How do we do that? Well, 16 times 3 is 48. So if we multiply this whole top equation by 3, that's going to give us 3/2 x plus 3ay is equal to 48. And I'm going to write down the bottom equation as well. So now that the y-intercepts line up, we also have to line up the coefficients of the x terms and the y terms. So b must be clearly 3/2, and then 3a must be equal to 4, and now we have to isolate a, so we divide both sides by 3, giving us a is equal to 4/3. So we have our b value and we have our a value, and the question is asking for a plus b, so we just add up the fractions. 3/2 plus 4/3, we need a common denominator, so I'm going to choose 6. And then 2 times 3 is 6, so I also do 3 times 3 to the numerator. And then 3 times 2 is 6, so I do 4 times 2 for the numerator for this fraction. That's going to be 17/6. And that is the answer. Whew, okay, now let's go to our last question. The xy plane above shows a circle with center O and radius 2. If the measure of angle POR is pi over 3 radians, what is the x-coordinate of point P? Okay, so if we draw a line directly vertical, that's going to be this length over here is going to be the x-coordinate of point P. So we have to find the value of this length. And it says that angle POR is pi over 3 radians, but what does that even mean? Well, we have to go from radians to degrees. We're going to convert. When going from radians to degrees, you would have to multiply by 180 over pi. But then if you were to go from degrees to radians, you would multiply by pi over 180, but in this case it's radians to degrees, so we do 180 over pi. Okay, so we take pi over 3 and then multiply it with 180 over pi, cancel it out diagonally. So whenever canceling factors out, you could either go diagonally or vertically, but you cannot go horizontally. So let's go vertical again. 180 is divisible by 3, and 180 divided by 3 is 60. So that's how I cancel it out, and this whole thing just gives me 60. So it's 60 degrees. This angle is 60 degrees. So let me redraw this triangle over here. We have P, O, I'm going to call this unknown length N. And then this angle, as we know, is 60 degrees. And since I drew a line directly straight down, this is going to be a 90-degree angle. And we know that the length of the hypotenuse is 2. And then this is actually a special right triangle because this angle would be 30 degrees. Because in a triangle, there are a total of 180 degrees. This is a 30, 60, 90 triangle, and there's a little hack or formula for that special right triangle. Basically, if the leg closest to the 60 degrees has a value of x, or a length of x, then the length of the other leg would be x root 3, and the length of the hypotenuse would be 2x. So there are some similarities. I mean, these two triangles are exact same. We know that the hypotenuse is 2, so we set 2 equal to 2x. The x value would have to be 1, meaning that the length of this line over here is 1. And that's going to be our answer.